Hello, Anna.
Hi. Hello. Okay, let me test this.
Ano ka muna? Mag-mute tayo. Yun. Mute.
Hi, Tony.
Hi, there are two Annas on the line. Anna Mopupa helping out Sir Tony and Anna Pacetas of SharePHIL.
Okay.
Yeah. Hi, Tony. Fred Parongaw
I
here.
think we have two Freds.
Ano ka muna? Mag-mute tayo.
Masyadong common ang pangalan eh.
We have two Freds, two Joeys, and two Annas.
How about that? Anna? Anna, I could not enter the video because it says you cannot start your video because the host has disabled it.
It should be okay now. It should
Okay, I got it. you cannot start your video because the host has disabled it. I got it now.
It should be okay now. It should
Okay, I got it. You cannot start your video because the host has disabled it.
Okay. Kaya pala siya umuulit. Dito pala yung live stream din. Ako na nga.
Yeah, it becomes live. Okay.
I think it'll be muted throughout. Anna? Anna?
Yes.
Yes. Ano ba? Naka-mute naman, no, during the whole, unless it's his turn to talk, right? That's
Yeah.
so we don't have to mute it on our end.
The whole time.
Huh?
You can be on mute the whole time until the panel discussion.
Okay, so we don't need to press it anymore.
Yeah. I
Okay.
can control it and I'll monitor it.
Okay, sige, you control it na lang. Thank you. You can mute it. You can turn off video too.
Sus, napadami.
Hello?
Yaro, nakabihi sila.
Hi,
Naka-ano?
Joey. Hello?
Nakabihi.
Naka-PM, sabi mo?
Bihis!
Uy, may visa ko. May visa ko. Wait,
Bayaan mo na siya.
okay.
Sus,
Samahan kita.
damit ko nasa Manila, yung mga damit ko.
Joy.
Ewan ko, okay, pen long sleeve. Sus.
That's too funny.
Hello?
Yeah, pwede na yun.
Ay, alam ko na. Maulan. Ano sabi ni Bang?
Good afternoon, Attorney Francis.
Hello? Yeah, I'm
Hi.
here. Waiting for the staff.
All right, that's fine.
May tao ba?
Hello, Kong Joey? Kong Joey?
Charo, nag-jacket ka?
May ka?
Nag-scarf ako, boss. Na-conscious ako sa'yo.
Hindi ako eh. Kasama ba si
Okay.
Teacher Kimbo?
Picture Kimbo.
Tuloy-tuloy kasi yung meeting namin, Attorney Francis. Kaya we haven't,
Sige,
yeah.
ipag nyo.
So, yeah. We haven't, para sa bayan po.
Para sa bayan.
Para sa bayan.
Tuloy ba tayo sa May 4?
Yes, sir. With the,
Pero,
with the economists.
pero ang sa
Ikaw yung kailangan dun.
Yoko. Sa Bicol ako.
Ay,
Visit na. Open na nga yan. Bahala na.
ay.
So we already have Congressman Joey, Congressman Sharon, Dr. SP Cabral, Mr. Tony Mongkupa, and Francis Lim, Fred Pascual, and Fred Parungao from SharePHIL. This is Anna Pasatas from SharePHIL.
Joey, we'll do the same as we did in the hearing. Yeah? All right.
No, I think you show the emerging framework. Yung pinakita natin kanina sa airlines. I think you should focus on that. Yun na lang slide dapat eh. Ay. Wala na. Ay nako, patay na naman tayo. Noy, kita raw.
Naririnig ka, Kong Joey.
Nawawala ako.
Naririnig ka, klaro.
Ah, sorry.
Klaro.
Hirap.
Wala pa yung iba eh.
Media, lahat gusto eh.
Attorney Lim, si Ana nandito. Stella cannot enter.
I'll ask Ana.
Yeah, yes, please. To contact her na lang. She's having a hard time.
Yeah, sige, okay.
I'm talking to her, to Kara, her staffer from on Viber.
So you're talking to her staff, Ana?
Yes, sir. Ha 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 ha.
Sino itong baliktad? Ano siya, Ron? Yeah, ang ganda na ng format kanina kaso may lang.
Wait. Yeah.
Padala mo nga sa akin.
All right, I'll tell her. Yeah, bye. Anna, can you directly talk to Stella because you're at capacity na daw, hindi siya pinapapasok.
Alis muna ako.
Uy, sandali. Anna, did you hear that? All right, thank you. Can you call her directly na lang, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have her number?
No.
No?
I just have,
I'll pass it. I'll pass it to you.
Pero kung may 60 pa kayo, the entire house media wants to get in.
we have YouTube live po.
Ay, they wanna ask questions eh.
We can ask questions there, and then we have someone on our team collating.
They want their face.
Yeah.
I see.
What's
Salit lang.
What were you saying, Joey?
Yung format kanina, maganda, ang ganda-ganda na. Pahingin ng copy.
Yes, sir. I'll send it to you by Viber. Nice eyes ko lang siya.
Sos, ganda-ganda na, ayusin pa.
Simple lang naman di ba?
Ang ganda.
Para clear lang siya.
Parang clear lang siya. Ganda-ganda na niya. Kasi yung sectoral tsaka face, na merge mo.
Hello. So try
Isang
using the link. I think you have to use the link that they emailed you. Because I tried the link and it let me in. You have to use in the email. You just have to click it and then that will bring you in. The link to you. It's from SharePHIL. The email is from SharePHIL. So it sends. Click here to join. Yeah, click here to join.
Pwede ko papasamahin yung mga media? Ano ba yun?
Baka puno na siya.
There,
I
Yeah,
said,
the password for that is SharePHIL if it asks.
RG Cruz.
Na all caps.
Toby ng Basis. Andito ba yung mga yun? Hello? Are you here? Inquire, si Neil. Star, si Edu Punay. Paano ba yun? Okay lang yan.
papasukin mo lang. Papasukin.
Nandito sa tabi ko. Nasa Bicol kasi ako eh. Takot ako dyan sa mikrobyo nyo. Nasaan ka ba, Sharon?
Dito sa Makati.
Wow.
I cannot get out and I cannot get in Iloilo.
Las Marinas ka.
No. Malapit lang, pero hindi ako daso.
Kondo ba yan?
Yes.
Oh,
Ayala Avenue.
wow. Kapitbahay mo si Imelda.
Same building.
Sabi ko na.
Kong Joey, nakapasok na raw si RG Cruz.
Ah, good. Ang kulit kahapon eh. Actually, Sharon, ang pinakamagandang epidemic curve, Metro Manila eh.
Bakit? Why you say that?
Ang ganda na
Yung
siya.
response niya?
Maganda na talaga siya. Kasi nandiyan na yung capacity. Nandiyan na yung,
Yeah.
Kaya kung pwedeng bakura ng Metro Manila, yun ang bubuksan ko.
Kaya lang yung sa labas din eh. Kaya lang yung tabi niya, umaangat na rin eh.
Babakuran mo nga. Babakuran mo.
It's too, contiguous eh.
I-lock in. Parang yung ginagawa mo, panambababae ang jowa mo. Binabakuran mo talaga.
Binabaril ko na lang yan, walang bakod-bakod na.
Bakuran mo.
Ikaw naman pahirapan ko pa sarili ko.
Ang ganda na kasi ng Metro Manila, pwedeng bitiwan eh. Dami lang infection pero ano na yun eh. Na curtail na.
Yeah, I think so too.
Tapos maraming test. Out of the 80,000, 70,000 sa Manila. Uy, may bago. Parang sarap
Wait,
na sa
Hello?
Hello.
Hello.
Yan. Pwede na tayo mag-schedule ng NEDA, Joey, if you want. With Carl.
Kay Carl.
What do you think?
Yung tapusin
Not yet?
natin yung iba.
Sige.
Meron pa tayo.
P-
Banks. Wala.
PGC and banks.
Banks nga. Para kompleto na.
Alright. Sige. I'll ask them na lang. You want BSP?
Wala masyado makukuha sa BSP.
O banking sector na lang.
Banking sector.
And then PGC and LBP and DBP.
Alam mo kung ako, yung mga chambers, may mapupulot.
Sige, I'll finish the banks and then the chambers.
JFC,
That's fine. All right.
PCCI, BAP, MAP.
Ito, yung kay dito.
The usual mafia.
All right.
Kasi nag-explain daw kay Karen Davila eh.
Naintindihan ka. Sabi.
Yung mga ina-explain ko daw, ubos lang kahit isang tao lang. Isang tao lang daw, ubos yun. No name.
Di ba? Naisip ko na yun.
Ay,
Bahala.
bye-bye. Tayo muna si Stella. Diyos ko. Walang aircon ko.
Hello.
Hello. Hello, Anna, can you hear me?
Kape.
Anna, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Who's this?
Fred Parungao.
Fred, yeah?
It is Francis.
Yes. Sila Congressman Joey, sila siya Congressman Woman Sharon nandiyan na.
So who are we waiting for ba?
Stella is still trying to come in.
Si Kong Stella is trying to come in. I don't know. There's some technical difficulties.
Oh, okay. So yeah, just let me know when we can start
Yeah.
the meeting. Thank you.
Attorney Francis,
Yes.
dami kong kaklase nanonood pala dito.
Dami?
Mm.
Siyempre. Kaka-release lang ng bar, ha? Bar exam?
Ganun ba?
Oo. Oo.
I
Ngayon
get
lang.
text. Just now lang. I haven't looked.
About 2 hours ago.
Ang alin?
Bar
Bar.
exam results.
Kumusta yung
Nag-ano
Ateneo?
Wala, hindi nag-top ang UP na Ateneo.
Hmm.
UST. And some provincial schools.
No, UST Legazpi. 1 and 3.
I call our meeting to order so we can start.
Okay.
Fred Pascual.
Fred is the MC.
Well, the moderator,
The moderator MC.
MC, of course. Okay, I just want to say that this webinar is brought to you by the Shareholders Association of the Philippines, SharePHIL for short. SharePHIL's mission is to educate, equip, and empower investors to create and build wealth to propel and sustain economic growth. So the topic we will discuss this afternoon is very germane to our mission because we want to have a growing economy and people can create wealth. We would like to thank the following partner organizations: the Management Association of the Philippines, MAP, FINEX, the Institute of Corporate Directors, ICD, and we have also the American Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines, European Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines, Investment House Association of the Philippines, Club, and the Philippine Women's Economic Network. This will be a moderated discussion. We will have a question and answer session after the panel discussion. The audience can submit their questions through the Q&A panel. The Q&A button is at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So I may now call on the president of SharePHIL, May Tukayo, Fred Parungaw, to formally welcome the participants in today's session.
Thank you. Good afternoon. This is Fred Parungaw. As Dr. Pascual has said, in behalf of SharePHIL, the Shareholders Association of the Philippines, I'd like to thank you for participating in this webinar. We would like to thank our partner organizations for organizing this webinar and for encouraging their members to register as participants. I understand that our registrations had reached almost 800. I'd like also to thank our distinguished speakers, Congresswoman Sharon Garin, Congresswoman Stella Kimbo, and Congressman Joey Salceda for sharing with us today their proposals for the economic recovery of the country through fiscal stimulus. My thanks also go to our distinguished panel of reactors, Dr. Esperanza Cabral, Mr. Joey Concepcion, and Mr. Tony Moncupa. We certainly look forward to a lively discussion. I'd now like to call on our past president, Attorney Francis Lim, for some comments regarding the topic for today's webinar. Francis?
Okay, thank you very much. Let me check. Thank you very much. Am I being seen and heard? Hello?
I can see you.
Okay.
I can hear you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope that you and your families are continue to be healthy and safe while we're on an extended lockdown. Our summit for this year, which is I think the 7th for SharePHIL, will tackle an extremely important topic: a proposed legislation and vision at letting the country recover as quickly as possible from a pandemic that has taken the world and the global economy by surprise. There are now two bills that have been filed in Congress. House Bill number 6619, entitled National Stimulus Strategy Act, authored by no less than one of our panelists, the Honorable Joey Salceda, and House Bill number 6606, entitled Economy Moving Forward as One Act, authored by the Honorable Stella Luz Quibo. The country is indeed lucky, extremely lucky, I should say, to have two of the country's best economists as members of Congress during these turbulent times. Kong Stella, as some of you may know, graduated summa cum laude in BS Economics, a holder of PhD in economics, and an economics professor at the University of the Philippines. Kong Joey, of course, everybody knows. He's a management engineering cum laude from the Ateneo University, master's in business management with distinction from the Asian Institute of Management. But above all, I think he is known as the chief architect of the fiscal reform program of the Arroyo administration. I have read their bills, and as we, the Management Association of the Philippines, has pointed out in our position paper, they cover the important sectors that deserve assistance from social and economic standpoints. They are responsive and comprehensive in coverage and specific in the total and sectoral amounts to be allocated. Their guiding principles essentially address the current and future requirements for economic recovery and growth, while at the same time aim at promoting fairness. We are equally fortunate to have the Honorable Sharon Garin as the chairperson of the Economic Affairs Committee. Chairperson Garin is not only a lawyer, but also a holder of a master's degree in business administration from Barcelona, Spain.
Wow.
Chairperson Garin will reconcile the two versions. Will conduct, I think he has already started doing so, technical working group and committee hearings on the two bills, and defend the reconciled version before the plenary. Reconciling these two brilliantly authored bills is indeed a tough act. But based on the current version of the consolidated bill that I've seen, I must say that Chairperson Sharon is doing a great job. Thank you very much, Kong Sharon, Stella, and Joey, for agreeing to be our principal speakers. We at SharePHIL truly appreciate your enlightening us and the public on the stimulus package you're trying to put in place for the country. As our President Fred said, we're also joined by panelists, former Health Secretary Cabral, Joey Concepcion, representing the MSME sector, Tony Mongkupa, from the banking industry, and no less than our friend Pascual, who will react to the presentations and share their insights on the proposed legislation. Thank you very much, Secretary Cabral, Joey, Tony, and Fred. From the SharePHIL family, thank you to one and all, especially our supporting organizations, for being a part of the summit. Maraming salamat and enjoy the session. Hello.
Yeah, shall we start with Kong Sharon?
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon to my fellow legislator. Congresswoman Stella is just having technical difficulties. She'll try to come in when she can enter the Zoom meeting. Currently, maraming salamat po for the opportunity for us to explain to you what our proposal is in Congress. Basically, if we go back to the basics, we are in ECQ because what we want to do is flatten the curve of infection. So everybody's staying at home. There are less infections, so we have less deaths. People are staying home, but employees are not working and businesses are not open. When we are in ECQ, we save the lives, but we put our paychecks on hold, livelihoods on hold. But Bayanihan Act is only 3 months, and we are anticipating the lifting of the ECQ, whether gradual or transitory, on May 15, hopefully. So we have to assess what is the impact post-COVID, post-ECQ. We are not talking about here the social amelioration that each and every household in the country needs, the 5,000 and the 8,000, or what the OFWs need to go home to their own provinces. What we are trying to assess is what is the economic impact of COVID-19 after ECQ, because economy is on a standstill while there is quarantine. Now, why do we need economic stimulus for the effects of ECQ? It is because of the 1 million businesses. 1 million businesses, because we have 1 million establishments. They need government help so they can help 30 million families, 30 million employees. Basically, our main concern is employment. The lifeblood of the economy is employment. Without jobs, people will not have income, won't have food on their tables, and won't be healthy members of the society. Around 40 million Filipinos have jobs in the country. The economic downturn post-ECQ will affect the security of most of our labor force. Kaya po, this is not just, principally this is a job protection or employment protection bill. It is an economic stimulus so that these companies won't abandon, won't retrench their employees. If I can just explain the impact, I'm sorry. Here. First, we have the daily wage and informal workers. They're the most vulnerable, let's say. There are 30 million workers in that, depending on who counts, but as per our sources, it's 30 million. So pag nag-retrench, mauuna yung mga yan. And in fact, the informal workers, most of them are not registered. Overseas Filipino workers, OFWs. In our last meeting, our recent meeting with DOLE and OWA, they estimate around 250,000 Filipino OFWs to be repatriated because of this. Some are already here. Welcome, Congresswoman Stella. Some are already here. Some have been sent back. Micro and small and medium enterprises. Okay. All right. Micro and small, we are talking about 1 million establishments, and this basically employ 6 million workers. Due to the pay wages, no sales mode, nagbayad sila dati kahit wala silang kita. During the ECQ, the hardest hit establishments are the MSMEs in view of limited liquidity. They have likely dipped into their paid-up capital or their own pockets in order to pay wages during ECQ, and will likely sell, discontinue, or retract or change business activities in the future. Now, non-essential. Only the essential businesses were allowed to operate. This is the list. This is based on the issuances under the Bayanihan Act. Only businesses in essential services are allowed to operate during ECQ. Hospitals, pharmacies, food, banks, utilities, telecommunications, and media. Non-essential, those that are not in the list, have to stop operations and go into pay wages, no sales mode. Kahit wala kang benta, they still pay the salaries of their employees up to a certain degree, depending on the company. These businesses employ a total of 17 million workers, Filipinos. For every ECQ month, according to the calculation of Cong Stella, they will spend about 60 billion pesos in wages, all this non-essential. Although the situation is more dire with MSMEs, ang liquidity problem is a problem of both large and MSMEs. This may result retrenchment again because of COVID, kasi nga, because of the restrictions during ECQ. The last would be critical industries. Ito yung mga, depending on which readings that you refer to, they would say, I'll give you some examples. And in critical industries, for example, this one, this is Moody's. They say the red part would be the critical industries. Gambling, consumer durables, automotive supplies, manufacturers, apparel, lodging, because tourism there, cruise lines, we've seen that already, passenger airlines, aviation, retail na non-food, and global shipping. Ang medyo hindi affected dito, yung mga essential. There's another study. This is by decode. Same, basically it's almost the same. Aviation, tourism are the hardest hits. So these companies that are hardest hit will be the ones that probably will retrench or let go of their employees. This is, kaya po, we really do need a stimulus package. Because the Bayanihan Act is only 3 months, and we need the stimulus package to ensure that Filipinos are secure in their livelihood after ECQ. We need to help the businesses, whether it's micro, small, medium, or large, in order to help Filipinos secure their sources of income and be able to feed their families. The threats that the businesses and our economy will face post-ECQ, nakakatulong po yung mga ginawa na natin dati. But this time, this is probably the most important economic measure that Congress will ever do. We have 2 bills now. That's authored by Congressman Joey Sartizal Seda, which is National Stimulus Strategy. And then the other one is Representative Stella Luz Kimbo, the economy moving forward. And I have the difficult role of consolidating both. I'll show you the general overview of the bills while we are consolidating. This one. Okay. This is how we set it up. It's a very well thought process. No? Both authors are experts in economics, and we've had inputs from you, from the business sector, from the members of the committee, from the agencies. So first and foremost, the general intervention, we need massive testing. Not mass testing, but massive testing. We need to equip our LGUs because this will last a long time. We are not pretending that this will be over after ECQ. No, it will go on until we have a vaccine. As Kong Joey always insists that until we have a vaccine, we will still have to have interventions. So massive testing under DOH protocols, every LGU you provide, or for example, if you have airports to give consumer confidence, there should be available testing kits there. So 20 billion we propose to be allotted there. The figures, we can debate on that, but that's approximately what we have determined. Now, there will be specific interventions. If we are talking about employment, the problem basically now is liquidity of the companies. In yung basic yan, the immediate need. So first and foremost, we have transitional, financial, sectoral, and structural. Transitional are wage subsidies, compensation for the victims. Kasi yung iba, for example, they recover, but they still have to do 14 days quarantine. So we provided for that. Kong Stella and Kong Joey will be in more details about this. Regulatory relief, yung mga fees and charges of the agencies to be waived for a while. Regularization, we will want to encourage all this informal sector to register so they can avail of the privileges or the interventions. Now, financial, that will focus on the liquidity portion and also to to give the companies an opportunity to restructure the companies or their business model if it is not doable anymore, considering that we have had COVID. So we have financial credit mediation, loans for agri-fishery, loans for MSMEs, zero or negative interest loans, and then we have PHIL guarantee as well. Now, after that, we have tried to identify what are the sectors that are hardest of the hardest hit. We have identified MSMEs. MSMEs are it's a big portion of our GDP. If you look at it, they are across borders, and they do need specific help on that. So we have MSMEs. Tourism is about 12% of our GDP, employing about depending on what you include, there could be 3 million to 5 million employees. Import and exports has 500,000 employees, but their GDP is quite high, about 30%. And then aviation, all countries now have interventions in the aviation industry. In fact, for example, for KLM, there was a 10 billion grant from France and from the government of France. And then we have some industry policies that we have proposed as well. Structural, this will be more long-term. Actually, this has been well developed by Kong Joey as well. National Development Corporation, you know that already, that it's like our bailout company. Enhanced PBB, because our economists to insist that these are the drivers of our economy. Infrastructure should not be touched, or in fact, it has to be increased. And some monetary policies that we suggest to BSP and SEC. So in general, we are trying to cover everyone. All of these interventions are for everyone, except that we identify some sectors that are specifically need help. Now, I would like to thank opportunity for presenting this, and I think Stella and Joey are the better persons to explain the details of this and the economic side of this. But I do believe that with the right interventions and budget, we can bring our economy back, economic growth back almost to the same level as before COVID. I humbly urge that you help us, create a measure that would really apply to the needs of the Filipinos and secure the jobs of Filipinos. The businesses right now do need assurance. They need business confidence. And our countrymen, the Filipino workers, have to have hope. Kaya they both have to trust that help is coming. Help is coming from the government through these interventions or any other interventions that you may come up or you can suggest to us. I hope that we can enlighten you with our presentation, and I hope that we can save lives with this presentation, with this proposal, save our livelihood, and we flatten the recession curve. Thank you, and good afternoon sa inyo lahat.
Thank you, Kong Sharon. Shall we now go to Kong Stella to start off the presentation of her bill?
Thank you po. Good afternoon to everyone. Marami na pong napaliwanag at nabanggit si Kong Sharon. Maybe I'll just add a few things. As we speak, people are losing their jobs. There's a survey that was recently conducted by Gallup International. They did the field work April 6 to 8, and that survey indicated that in urban areas, 34% of the respondents said that they had already lost their jobs. And about 55% of the respondents said that a substantial portion of their income had been lost. So we will keep on emphasizing that this bill really is for purposes of protecting workers against the risk of layoff. And we want to do this by ensuring business continuity. So next, please. Next slide, please. Again, just for context, there are 41 million workers in our entire economy. And after COVID, after the lockdown, when we are able to restart our activities again, ang sigurado pong may trabaho would be about 9 million individuals. This would include about 3.7 government workers. Kasama na rin po dito yung mga employees in the essential businesses, as explained by Kong Sharon earlier. Pati rin ang ating mga kasambahay. So they number about 1.9. So all of these 9 million individuals are more or less not going to be affected by COVID. But for 29 million individuals, including workers, including business owners, as well as employers, they are potentially going to be affected by COVID in varying degrees. So of course, if the effect of COVID on a business is going to be severe, then layoffs can happen. Otherwise, if it's just a moderate risk, we may avoid layoffs. However, there's a possibility that compensation may be reduced, for example, by not giving bonuses, or maybe reduce work hours, particularly for hotels, where a full-time shift will now be shared by 2 workers. Next, please. Right, so again, so this was already mentioned earlier, ang direct hits po ng COVID would be those in the tourism and trade sectors, because these sectors, even without the lockdown, were already affected by COVID. In tourism, there are 6.5 million workers. And if we include all sectors that also support tourism, like for example, retail trade, transportation, entertainment, etc., we are looking at about 30% of the entire workforce. And for trade, what the sector that would be mostly affected would be the exporters and importers in the manufacturing sector. And I estimated that about 70,000 establishments in this sector would be affected, covering about 500,000 workers. And then again, next please. The ones that would also be affected, so this is a ranking that I did on my own on the basis of payroll costs as well as interest expenses. So in addition to trade and tourism, those businesses whose operations were disrupted during the lockdown but continued to pay payroll, continued to pay interest expenses, the ones with the biggest overhead costs would include retail trade, land transport, construction, crop and animal production, wholesale trade, repair of motor vehicles, manufacture of computer products, which would include, of course, our top export, which is semiconductors. Schools would also be included in this list of critically impacted non-essential businesses. Accommodation services, meaning hotels. And then number 10 would be office administrative services, which would include BPOs. So these 10 sectors alone already account for about 23 million workers of the 29, which I think would be somehow affected by COVID. Next, please. So Kong Sharon also mentioned the difficulties that MSMEs would face. Just to give you an idea of the scale of assistance that we need to give to this sector, we have about 1 million MSMEs that are formally registered with SSS or BIR. But about 75% of them, or about 750,000 of them, would be in these non-essential businesses and therefore would be possibly critically impacted. But of course, there's a bigger number that would be in the informal sector. This is a proxy measure that I use. Of course, by definition, we won't have information about the informal sector, but using a proxy and the Family Income and Expenditure Survey, there's an estimate of about 4.5 million informal MSMEs that would also be in these non-essential businesses. Next, please. All right, so what can government do to ensure business continuity? So when I was drafting the bill, I thought that the philosophy that we should take is that it's really going to be virtually impossible for government to tailor fit a solution for every distressed company. There's just too many affected, all sizes, cuts across many sectors. So what I think should be is that governments should help businesses help themselves. In other words, if a small business, for example, has a brick and mortar shop and decides that because of the COVID experience wants to do online sales, this firm can go to the DTI, for example, and ask for grants and be assisted for that purpose. But the 4 principles that I think can also be adopted as government provides assistance to businesses would be the following. Assistance should be compensatory, which means that if businesses had to pay out payroll expenses as well as interest expenses despite not having sales, they should somehow be compensated by government so that they would have sufficient working capital moving forward after the lifting of the lockdown. Number 2, this is very important, particularly for small businesses, capacity building. This would include retraining, retooling, even advising by consultants. The main purpose here would be to help businesses cope with what we call the new normal. And there are like countless examples. The simplest example that I can think of is a barber would now need to wear gloves. Yung pong barbero, pag binigyan mo ng guantes, maiiba na ang kanyang pagputol ng buhok. So clearly, in this very simple example, training would be needed. Number 3, zero interest loans. Again, for purposes of boosting liquidity. Many companies face a liquidity problem rather than a solvency problem. So wala naman pong fundamentally wrong with the economy before COVID. It's just that right now, we've been stopped dead on our tracks. And the main goal at this point is how to restart the economy. Finally, I think we should adopt a proportionality principle, meaning to say that the assistance that we provide to businesses should be of a right size. It shouldn't be too small so that it's not impactful, or it shouldn't be too big so that it's wasteful. Next, please. Right, so this is just, you don't have to like understand every number there, but basically I did a number of growth simulations, and I think that, and I did this assuming a 45-day lockdown. So assuming a 30 to 45-day lockdown. So the worst scenario here is that we lose about 5.5 percentage points in terms of GDP growth. And next, please. And every point of GDP growth is actually worth 198 billion pesos. So if we lose 5.5 points, meaning if we go from a 6% growth to say 0.5% growth, meaning close to zero, just multiplying 5.5 by 198 gives us about 1.1 trillion pesos. So that was my estimate of possible economic losses that we need to be able to avert by way of passing an economic stimulus plan. Next, please. So, next, please. So if the if the estimated loss is 1.1 trillion pesos, how much does government need to put into the economy to pump prime it? It's certainly less than 1.1 trillion because what is called multiplier effects, meaning to say every 1 peso that government puts into a particular sector, for example, infrastructure, would mean that other related sectors would also have ramped up activity, so that initial 1 peso spending by government would impact GDP by more than 1 peso. So using a multiplier of 1.53, we simply have to divide our loss of 1.1 trillion by that multiplier, and we would get 700 billion pesos. So that's the estimated amount of money that we need to put into the economy to pump prime it to avert a loss of 1.1 trillion pesos. But as had been mentioned earlier, we've already passed the Bayanihan Act. My initial estimates of how much government would have to shell out for Bayanihan Act is something like 330 billion pesos. So the 370 billion pesos, that's what I said should be put into economic stimulus, again, for purposes of protecting workers by way of business continuity. Next, please. So this is a menu of interventions. Again, so you've seen this already earlier. Again, there's wage subsidies going from 25 to 75% of payroll. Again, this is for purposes of moving forward. We have a number of agencies which should be giving out interest-free loans, including SBC, that's a small business corporation, the Agricultural Credit Policy Council, or ACPC. We also have Land Bank as well as DBP. Number 3 would be loan guarantees to be provided by Philippine Guarantee Corporation. And then grants, which I explained earlier, basically flexible assistance to be given to distressed businesses, again, at no cost for purposes of education, training, as well as consulting. And we have identified 3 agencies to implement this, including the DTI, DOT, as well as the BOI. And then finally, some compensation for paid sick leave of COVID patients, so for both public and private workers. Next, please. So that was what I showed you earlier, that those are really the transitional measures that are needed this year, 2020, immediately for purposes of restarting the economy. But of course, we need to also think about the long run. Kong Joey has more grand plans for the long run, but what I had in mind was simply for NEDA to put in a long run plan for purposes of improving our ability to withstand and recover from shocks, or what we call economic resilience. And this would include things like building the capacity of our health sector, not only in terms of facilities like hospitals, but also with respect to healthcare workers. And then I'll skip enhanced BBB because I think Kong Joey is the expert on that. And then finally, also improving the database of government. So right now, we experienced a bit of some implementational difficulties under the Bayanihan Act. At ang naging problema dyan, yung listahan ng target beneficiaries. So I think this is a wake-up call for us to restart or sort of revive our efforts in having a national ID system. Next, please. And the next, I have 2 extra slides, if you don't mind. Next, please. All right, so obviously we can't be on lockdown forever. It's very expensive. Every day of lockdown costs us about 18 billion pesos. So we really need to think about ways to reopen the economy. And ang aking mungkahi naman po dyan is we should take a gradual, cautious, and informed approach to opening the economy. So what do I mean by that? When we reopen, before we reopen, we need to first of all do a proper risk assessment. And when we talk about risk assessment, there are at least 2 important things that we need to watch out for. One is, of course, the risk of virus spread. And the other would be the risk of having an overburdened health system. For overburdening of health system, I'm using just 2 measures here. Just the number of isolation rooms per active case of COVID, as well as the number of ventilators. All right, so what do we do next? After we assess risks, what we can do is to adopt a work strategy for every risk scenario. So I've thought of at least 3 work strategies. In the highest risk scenario, right, where risk of virus spread would be high and where risk of overburdened health system would also be high, what we can do is to allow selected work in selected sectors. So in certain workplaces that can be COVID-free, and we can do that in various ways, as well as in selected sectors, we can allow that. And then if risk is not too high, but maybe medium level risk, what we can do is to allow all work in selected sectors. Now, of course, in a lowest risk scenario, then we can allow all work. But again, this is subject to border control because we're really thinking about a situation where provinces as a whole will still be locked down. Now, any type of reopening, whether it using strategy 1, 2, or 3, would clearly require a disease surveillance protocol from the DOH. By this, we mean we should be able to do contact tracing. At this point in time, I'm not sure if you know, there are 952 of the positive cases na hindi po natin alam kung saan sila nakatira o nasaan sila nagtatrabaho. In other words, we don't know where they are. So if we don't know where they are, who knows, they can be our neighbors and we can be infected, right? So before we even talk about reopening, all of these basic unknowns should be removed, right? And once that is removed, then proper contact tracing can happen. So kung hindi natin alam kung nasaan si patient 0, hindi natin malalaman kung sino ang kanyang mga contacts. And then of course, what is key, and this has been talked about over and over, is that mass testing is really key to reopening our economy. This is akin to opening a flashlight in the dark. Of course, this is because maraming asymptomatics in our population. In Korea, I think it's about 20%. In some other countries, it's as high as 40 to 50%. Sa atin, hindi natin alam syempre kung ano pa yan because we haven't even done, we have just started to do mass testing. So anyway, that's my moving forward slide. And then maybe lastly, I just want to show you, last slide, please. Here, so in this discussion paper that I wrote, I can share you the link later on. Based on the risk assessment, this is my attempt to classify provinces by type of risk on the basis of virus spread as well as overburdened health system, which I think is the first step towards a gradual, cautious, and informed reopening of our economy. So yun lang po. Maraming salamat. Magandang hapon po.
Thank you, Kong Stella. May I now call on Kong Joey to make his presentation.
Maraming salamat po sa PhilSTARE, sa fellow legislator ko, kay Stella at sa kay Sharon. Sawan-sawa na ako sa inyo. Next. Next. Ayaw mag-next.
Next slide.
Next slide. So, well, that's where no, next, back. So basically, the whole thing is really about this. We need really to test, because if you want to reopen, and with no cure and no vaccine, this testing that would enable a gradual return of businesses, business operation, and societal functions. We assume that the Philippines will make significant inroads in May 2020, that's next month. But without testing, a modified CQ will allow labor participation to increase from the current 23% to 50% or even over. But however, it will keep consumer labor and business confidence stuck in the cave at the risk of a second wave that would compel another lockdown, which both the economy and the government can no longer afford beyond May 15. In simple language, we have enough money until May 15, but beyond May 15, we will draw on the resources that we need for a recovery, for a meaningful recovery. So these are really the economic narrative. Essentially, we're looking at bridges to a vaccine. The discovery of vaccine is actually the most critical determinant of recovery. There are two basic scenarios: a vaccine by end 2021 or by end 2023. Both pathways start with minimum health standards, and nowhere can it start. The long road means higher fixed costs, lower economies of scale due to social distancing imperative. A quick vaccine is like magic. It will keep and where we can afford the health standards to the minimum required to anticipate future pandemics. And lastly, the narrative is all about the agility and the strength of the structural response. And of course, this is now an opportune time to pursue economic reforms that would shape the direction of the Philippine socioeconomic prospects. Next. Next page. Ito pa yung mga minimum health standards tingin ko should be met if you want to shift from ECQ to GCQ, frontliner protection, treatment, mechanical, ICUs, hospital beds, testing, but that presumes that we are able to shelter our vulnerable, especially the age 62 above, which is non-negotiable. Next. It will be there for you to. So what is the fiscal and economic situation right now? Next. So pag tiningnan mo, ako ang if you look at the global scenario, no vaccine, most likely it's -5. And for 2021, no vaccine, -1.5 because of the stimulus will bite into, at least provide some stimulus. And assuming you have a vaccine developed, then at least it would be at least 0. But the Philippines is always plus 0.4, plus 3%. If you look back, the Philippines is always 300 basis points over the world average. By 2022, recovery with vaccine, definitely, I'm sure. Structural measures, new taxes, deficit reduction. So we can keep the deficit from the 8 this year to 7 next year, and hopefully to 4.5 to 5 by 2022. So it will be a downward sloping. It's very critical, the shape of our deficit to GDP curve. And by 2023, hopefully we have structural reform and deficit reduction. And we can go back to 5.5 to 6%. Next. Bagal. So ito pa yung mga estimate. Obviously, pababa na pababa. Baka mag-negative na po yan. Next. So ito lang problema natin. Every time there is a crisis, 2097, 2008, our revenue tax to GDP goes down by 1.6 to 1.8% of GDP. So kahit wala tayong gawin, negative 325 billion na po ang increase in deficit due to revenue downfall. Next. Next. So the revenue effort, yeah, without, yes. So, but however, my own choice, given the choice between tax measure and tax relief, I think tax expenditure would be much better, and spending can certainly boost the economy and further arrest the decline in revenues. Tax cuts are very hard to restore. Next. So this is the Economic Stimulus Act of 2020. Next. So the objective of the strategy is to keep everyone in the boat, to keep firms from falling out for no fault of their own, to lift the economy from recessionary shock due to domestic and global lockdowns, and to restore economy to full employment in 3 to 5 years. Next. So these are the usual principles. Next. Next. I want to go to nahirapan mag-next. So again, these are the main objectives. So as usual, we keep using this heat impact. Next. So my own proposal is really for the high exposure, parang sasagutin ba. So basically we are now in the survival, well, that should be the next slide. Sorry, I rearranged it. Next. Next muna. Sorry, next. So we're now in the survival measures. We're going to the transition, back. Sorry, back. So nasa transition measure, papunta na tayo transition measure post-ECQ. And well, hopefully that we can roll out the structural measures before the end of the year. So ang structural measures ko basically negative interest loan, the NDC or the National Emergency Investment Corporation, the credit management refinancing, and of course enhanced BBB. Next. Back sana, back. Sorry. So halos pag high exposure, but for general is the enhanced BBB and the credit mediation and refinancing system. Next. Sorry. Magulo ngayon ang ano ko kasi pinalitan ko. So ito yung kay Sharon. It's a beautifully summarized. Next. 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 So this is virtually the format now of the House of Rep with continuing inputs from industries. Next. So ito po yung ano natin. Next. So let me just discuss the next. Ito pa ba, Sharon? Next. So what are with
The
respect
last
to
one? No.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. So gusto ko lang ito lang yung comment ko dun sa ano ni Stella, yung sa total measure, yung MSME regulatory. Pag tinignan mo Philippines, very high po ang informality ng labor sector, but I just wanna point to you, Vietnam. Sensing, of course, Vietnam, how it was able, 15.1. Sobrang, hindi ko alam kung ano ginagawa nila doon. So maganda ang automatic po ang growth ng buong economy na pupunta na may natural capture po ang government. Next. So these are the structural stimulus. Next. So ang proposal namin next. So yung una is enhance build. Basically ito po talaga yung design, 650 incremental, 250 next year, 200 the following year, 200. So that's 650. So infrastructure is one of the best public investment tools because it increases both consumption and investments. Next. So pag tinignan mo to, this is from where's this? From IMF. If you look at the first year, it's 1.02 for every 1 peso of infrastructure. So you look at the total, the net present value of the output multiplier is 3.66. So ang laki po talaga, wala akong stimulus na wala akong infrastructure pa. Kinat mo infrastructure, parang kinatay mo na rin yung buong stimulus. The whole idea is really that this 3.66 can really lift every boat in the river. Next. Next. So basically, ano ba yung mga namin, yung prioritization, high economic value can be finished within 2022, high potential for job creation, projects with ready plans, projects with little right of way, infrastructure to aid high impact industries, infrastructure to facilitate logistics, and infrastructure to facilitate balik probinsya. Next. So basically, we propose that the sectoral focus of build be on the following: health investments, so infrastructure supportive of creative industries, and infrastructure for public schools of the future, national broadband, digital classroom, etc. Para po may social distancing. Next. So yung pangalawa is credit mediation. Simple lang po ito. Essentially, ito yung mga negosyo center ng DTI. Pag may problema ang SMEs, dinagdan na startup, micro, small, medium enterprises. I think this will come out, this will be the new word that will come out of the bill. S for startup. So, yeah, yung S. So basically, ang lalabas dito, unang-una, pakikiusapan namin ng bangko kung pwedeng i-convert into a new loan yung utang niya para wala ng mga arrearages, etc. para meron din cash flow, makakaluwag sa cash flow. Pangalawa, pwede rin gamitan po ng credit guarantee. So ang mga actors po dito, next. Next. Ito po yung framework. Yan po yung may utang. So makikita nyo dyan pag sa dulo, may negosyo center, tapos either sa PGC or SB Corp. Anyway, so basically it's either new loans, a conversion of existing loans into new loans, and essentially the use of guarantee in order to get new money or better terms. Next. That is what CMRS is. So we are here the negative interest loan. Actually, lagi ang tinatanong bakit ini-insist ko negative. Kasi kailangan po ng we need to drive the animal spirit of our entrepreneurs na naipit masyado for the past 3 months. May malaking bukol sa kanila pong balance sheet na sa tingin ko ma-offset kagad. Although people might say they will flip it. Pero galing po ako sa Swiss bank kung saan kami pa binabayaran. It's called negative interest to keep your money. So basically, ang term is pag ikaw pumunta ng 100 million, ikaw pa babayaran namin. Imbis na magbayad ka ng 100, magbabayad ka lang ng 90, hindi ka pa magbabayad ng interest. Pero yung tama niyan sa deficit, yun lang pong tinatawag nating yung net interest carrying cost. Next. So bakit po ang negative interest varies? So these are labor conditionalities. Back muna, sorry. Magulo yata utak ko pag nasa province. So 100%, the maximum loanable should be 100% of the, di ko kasi nababasa 100% of the direct labor cost of the company. So yun ang maximum. Next. Lapit na po to. Next. So there will be applicable labor conditional penalties kung magtanggal ka ng 1%, magtanggal ka ng 10%, magiging reduction from the negative interest benefit. So pag nagtanggal ka ng trabahador, may penalty po. So ang mauutang mo lang based po sa total labor cost mo. Next. So basically the NIL advantages is government will pay for investment, productivity enhancing because it is conditional labor subsidy, and it's primarily recoverable and it lowers moral hazard. Next. Second to the last. Next. So this is the NDC, repurposed NDC. It's fiscally like the CB ball, wherein we took out the DBP and the PNB loans, put it in the BSP, and then the CB ball has already expired in 2018. That's 17% of GDP in 1993. Or you can also comparable to the PIRA, wherein we took out and bunch up all the stranded debt and stranded cost. It was worth 1.4 trillion. That's 25% of GDP in 2003. Pero tingnan mo, wala ho tayo naramdaman. I think kailangan po ng parang parallel o parang similar approach to asset resolution. In other words, yung mga losses o yung mga tama po sa balance sheet o yung mga negative cash flow, like for tourism, for airlines, etc., we could take the net present value or the enterprise value and the government can come in and provide them either liquidity or solvency because sa tingin ko mas malala ang mangyayari sa atin pag hindi natin sila pwede tayo magsugal, pabayaan natin sila matumba, pero napakahirap pong isipin kung patutumbayan mo ang SMS na 65% ng lahat ng labor natin, yung mga high profile din natin, yung ating pong flow of parang sabi ko, some of them may pose systemic risk to the general economy. Next. Next. Lapit na po. Next na. So ito po yung PISAM. Tingnan nyo yan. That's 25%. Natatakloban ni Sharon. Oh, my internet is not working. Back muna, sir. Back muna. Gusto ko ipakita yung chart. Kung gaano kagaling ng Pilipino. From 25% of GDP, halos na-resolve na po natin. By 2025, it will be net positive. Net positive. Next. Next. So ito po yung mga gagamitin nila. Mga gagamitin parang NDC po yan. Ito po, next na para mapabilis. May mga tanong naman eh. Next. So ito, kung wala tayong gagawin, bank and firm, pero stop. So now, papasok po yung NDC sa gitna. So pwede namin i-assume yung obligasyon ng mga kumpanya na temporarily insolvent. Tapos, siyempre pag kumikita na sila, babayaran din tayo, mababayaran din natin yung bangko. A simple example, yung ating where we have one industry with 175 billion in financial obligations. So pwede natin po yun ma-resolve through an asset resolution like the SPAB in 2005. Next. So itong National Emergency Investment Corporation, we can easily, pwede natin patakbuhin kaagad to by using the NDC. Next, paulit-ulit. Next. Patatapos na to. So in general, the advantages of a loan-based intervention for the private sector, kasi karamihan, kasi dalawa ang ginagamit natin, direct subsidy or loan-based intervention. So sa tingin ko naman, marirecover ng state. Kung babalikan mo, masagana 99 lang naman lagi nila na natuturo. Pero in general po, nakakasingil po ang gobyerno. So these are essentially corporate scheme for investment and reduces the more or less opposed to a total bailout and ensures liquidity supports going concern. Tax cuts are also difficult to withdraw politically and structurally. Kung top line relief ang ibibigay namin, mahirap po talagang tingnan. Next, baka malapit na. So plan feature, it's proportional to the national need, reasonable compared to other countries, doable based on previous episode, and it is financeable. Next. Wrap up na. So pag tinignan mo dito, yung based on DSG Iran, kung wala po to, ay yung ating pong mas malaking negative. Next. So diretso na. Ang bagal. As you can see, at most, our stimulus package is 8.7% of GDP. It's comparable. Next. Wrap up na. Next. Next. Ulit-ulit. Next. Next. So, financing mix. Last word ko na to. Basically po, yung ADB, pinautang tayo ng additional 2 billion. May recurring tayo na 3 billion. So, this year alone, pautangin ng time 5 billion. Ang Pilipinas po ay financeable. Ang ating pong credit ratings are, of course, were maintained, and our spread over 10-year note is 379 basis points, one of the most favorable in the region. So anyway, thank you very much. Pasensya na po kung napatagal po yung explanation.
Thank you, Kong Joey. So we've heard our three speakers. Let's see now how our panel of reactors would respond to the presentations. I call on Secretary SP Cabral to speak first. We'll give our reactors 5 minutes each.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, yes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes. We can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to this webinar on economic recovery through fiscal stimulus. I wondered what you wanted me to say about how the healthcare system can contribute to economic recovery. It is not something that we usually consider when we talk of reviving the economy. And true enough, in the papers provided to us to comment on, there was not much said about the role of healthcare in economic recovery through fiscal stimulus. But as the crisis that has caused our economy to stop on its tracks is a health issue, maybe there are things to say on how developing a resilient healthcare system able to deal with shocks like this is the ultimate solution to similar health turned economic disasters that are really just around the corner, threatening our way of life the same way that coronavirus has. The principal reason for the lockdown that the government imposed was to suppress the number of coronavirus cases to a level that our healthcare system can manage, and to buy time for our health system to increase its capacity so that it can deal with the expected surge of new cases when the lockdown is terminated. We are moving in that direction, but not in the scale nor at the speed that we would like. This is the reason why community quarantine had to be enhanced and also why it had to be extended. And God help us, why it will be extended again in one form or another. This makes the case for why increasing our healthcare system's capacity should be part of the national stimulus strategy. If we do not, we will simply repeat the experience we are going through now. Maybe next year, maybe 2 years from now, who knows? For sure, it will be sooner rather than later. Let's get ready by spending on improving our healthcare system. Spend on improving hard infrastructure. Build, 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 as you always say. The kind of hospital you would want to be admitted to if you have a serious illness. Spend on training, recruiting, and retaining more human health resource. Employ, employ, employ the kind of doctor that you want taking care of you and the nurse that you want assisting the doctor. Spend on research and development of medical equipment, drugs, vaccines, tests, supplies and materials such as personal protective equipment. Spend on production and stockpiling of these so that we are not forever dependent on imports. In a global crisis, we are going to get what we need only after the needs of the producing country and the richer buying countries are satisfied. Let's spend on our health. Invest in family planning, or we will have an extra 4 million people to take care of when the next contagion comes along. Invest in waste management, or we will drown in all of the personal protective equipments that we have used for this crisis. Invest in water so that at least we can have something to wash our hands with. Invest in housing so that when we say you must self-quarantine and self-isolate, they will have space to do so. Invest in data and technology so that we will know where we are at. Otherwise, we will repeat this cycle of spending trillions that we don't have to protect business and our workers and revive our economy. As we always say, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Cabral. May now, is Joey with us already? Joey Concepcion.
I'm with you.
So may I call on Joey Concepcion to share his thoughts with us.
Good afternoon. I just came from a PulseCon Zoom meeting and similar to this. So I guess everybody is curious to find out what will happen in May 15. Since the lockdown on March 15, the entire private sector, basically the 28 plus business organizations and the conglomerates have been meeting and at various times meeting with cabinet to really try to see how we can balance health and the economy, or buhay and kabuhayan. And Congressman Salcedo mentioned the stimulus package that is needed to revive the economy. I think what is really in our mind right now is how do we get out of jail? Basically, we've been at our homes for almost what now? Almost 6 weeks, and waiting out when the infection will be disappearing. If you look at China, they had basically 4 resets. When I refer to a reset, that's basically 14 days. In lieu of a test, a reset somehow, a lockdown, as we are experiencing, allows you to determine who is sick and who is not sick. And that's the science of it. And we are now at basically 3 resets with an extension of a 4th reset. And we cannot afford to have a 5th reset because I guess we'll be the only country who's exceeded China in terms of lockdown. And then again, we also want to avoid a lockdown in a very big area like Luzon and now at NCR, no? Because that means we really don't have control of the infection. So the strategy really is to focus on testing. There is no other way, and I've been saying this since the start of the lockdown, that testing is key to visibility. We are fighting an enemy that you don't see, and the only way to see is to test, and you create visibility. So then again, where do you focus your attention on? Moving forward, May 15, I believe that the ECQ will be lifted. I mean, unless we don't do a good job in what we are supposed to do, staying home. So these 4 resets, to me, is more than adequate to really have great visibility who is sick and who is not. Now, moving forward, May 15, the condition that I see is that in one of the models presented to us by the cabinet is we have to try to hit about 28,000 tests every day using the PCR, RT-PCR, which is basically the swab. But we know very well that capacities are just building up with Red Cross there, and the government likewise is trying to fix these issues. Unfortunately, the capacities were very, very low when we started this problem. So what did the private sector have to do? We had to look at alternatives like the rapid test kit. No? The rapid test kit, or what we call the ARC, which is the antibody rapid test kit, is a project that we started maybe now about 10 days ago. And today we have close to about over 120, 30 companies who have partaken in this project. So come May 15, bulk of the arrivals of the rapid test kits will happen. That's close to 1 million by then, the way we see the trending from the orders of the different private sector. And over the last days, I've been meeting organizations like yours, Palscon, Phoenix, etc., EU, all different organizations trying to understand what is the strategy to get the economy going. This is the strategy. We have to test. And the private sector is enjoined to really test more. Because if we don't test our own employees, then we will not have visibility in our own backyard. If we can afford to help the barangays, even better. No, it'll be much better if we can help the barangays by providing them test kits. Now, the argument of many doctors out there is the accuracy of a rapid test kit. Of course, it will not be accurate because as accurate as the PCR, because the antibodies are only captured at the 7th, 8th day from the start of the infection. Compared to the PCR, you can capture it on the 2nd day, more or less, 2nd, 3rd day. But many people don't go for a PCR test until they show symptoms. Right now, if you're asymptomatic, you will not get priority on this testing procedure, the RT-PCR, because there's a lack of capacity. But now, as more capacity is built up, definitely there'll be a better chance. But the priority still is to only test symptomatic people and not asymptomatic people. What the rapid test provides is something that the private sector can do, which is create visibility. So you may not, from the experience that we have seen is that it will determine whether a person is positive or negative. But if you're not sure, like Ricky Razon, he does this every 15 days. No? So he tests in the first week of the month and on the third week of the month to get a better reading. No? If you do that systematically, then it will help you develop a better reading, because the more you test using the rapid, the accuracy improves because you'll be able to catch it better. No? So that's what we've been recommending to many of those that are joining the ARC. No? Under the DOH rules, if somebody is confirmed to have the virus, you have to submit him for the RT-PCR, which is a swab test for confirmatory, and that's going to be followed. So all those joining the ARC will have to follow the protocols that we've outlined with. You have to have a nurse to prick your finger, because if you do it, you can easily do it yourself, but then if you're not used to it, then you can make a mistake and you waste the test kit. Of course, you have to have a doctor in place to be able to advise those who have symptoms, etc., etc. Now, on price, the rapid test kit costs anywhere. Prior to our entry, they were selling it at 1,000, 1,500, and some even as high as 2,000. So what we did is we consolidated and got one supplier who was very willing to do it for our country, and she's done it. And she's priced it at 450 pesos per test kit. So all the others out there have dropped their prices, which is good. And it allows people to be able to afford this. No? So due to the amount of volume that is being brought in, the prices have gone down. And others are now if they want to sell their test kit, they have to be at that range. So if you look at the cost of an RT-PCR test, it's about 3,500 per test. The other hospitals are charging anywhere between 8,500 and more. So where if you compare the rapid, even if you do it 4 times, it's far much cheaper than the PCR test. But I'm not saying that you should not test your employees with the PCR test or the swab test. I mean, it depends on how you design your testing strategy. Some people may do first a baseline using the PCR, but the challenge there is that you have to wait for the capacities to increase. Then maybe they'll allow asymptomatic people to be tested. Right now, it's only symptomatic people that will be tested. And then follow through with the rapid test frequently, maybe every other week, to just sustain that. Now, this testing, test is going to be there if we want to prevent a rebound or a second wave. We cannot let our guards go down, because what we have to do when we finish the last reset on May 14 is to ensure that we are vigilant at the barangay level. Why do I say the smallest community? Because that is where our barangay captains and our senior people in the military and the PNP and the DOH should focus at the smallest community, because that is where it starts. That is where it can restart again. So normally, most of our companies are located beside different barangays. So it would be good, aside from testing your own people, is to adopt a barangay and try to help the barangay so that your defense is further strengthened, because many of your employees live in the barangays close to you. Now, most companies right now that have joined ARC, from what I see, are testing their employees first. Maybe on the second wave, as they see it really gaining benefit for themselves, then they will look at further going to the other barangays. So that's how I look at it. So there is no other way, actually, if you ask me, on how we can save our economy. It's not really whether it's life or money or buhay or kabuhayan. It is all. We have to save lives. We have to save and protect the economy, especially our micro, small, and medium enterprises. Congress is doing a great stimulus package, but in the end, many banks, honestly speaking, are going to look at the business model more than the capability of paying. Let me explain to you why. What do you think restaurants will be moving forward May 15? Who will enter a restaurant whereby social distancing has to be done, whereby you have air conditioning that has to be properly looked at, because the air, if you've seen some of the videos, can blow in the direction that the saliva or the germs can move from table to another table. So will the social distancing rules have to be adjusted? Can a restaurant survive with just 50% of the capacity being allowed? Will people want to go in and dine there with the probable risk of getting the virus? So many business models will really change, and consumer confidence as well, because if they don't have confidence in the health situation, they're not going to go out to the stores, to the restaurants, to the malls, to shop, and to even buy a condominium or even a car or clothes. They're going to stick to the very basic till they realize that we're over the hump, we're over this virus, or that we have a better control of our health situation, or there is greater visibility. And that's why all of those joining the ARC, the importance of submitting the data as they do their test is very important. And we have emphasized that to them, that all of this data will be respected and will be collated under a group called Thinking Machines, who is doing the same data analytics for DOH. So the combined data of the private sector and the DOH will be so powerful that will help now all of us see where are the red zones, where are the green zones, and where are the yellow zones. Of course, we want to see more green and a bit of yellow and no red. And that gives you more a level of comfort as to where you can go and where you cannot go. So in a nutshell, our obsession really is this area. We know by a fact that 28,000 is the goal to be able to open up more the economy. I'm glad that the IATF and Carl Chua has accepted now rapid test kits to be allowed in the model that they do, which means they will factor in the amount of rapid test kits compared to before that was not being considered. Whether they adopt it 1:1, I don't think so. Maybe they'll discount it by 50%. But even though, because if we're going to do about 700,000 a month, I mean, I hope the companies consistently test their employees. Then you will have divided by 2, that's 350,000. So that's about 10,000 basically a day. So even if you achieve a PCR testing level of 20,000, you'll still make the 30,000 target. So testing really buys us, creates greater visibility, and with greater visibility, then we can focus, isolate the infected. As we isolate the infected, we can now trace. No? So test, isolate, and then trace. So this is the strategy that both Secretary Galvez is doing, and the isolation or the quarantine centers are already established. I don't expect those quarantine centers to be full of people by May 15. I believe that the infection, the greater clarity will happen by May 15. I expect that we will be, they will lift the ECQ. As to whether because if we only hit about 18,000 PCR tests a day, but if you factor in the rapid test there, it may be lower than that, then they will only open a minimum amount of things that we can do beyond essentials. No? But the goal is to allow construction to start. I mean, we have to employ the people. We have to bring back the workforce. We have to get our companies running and consumer confidence coming back, and being vigilant with the visibility through testing, and the government doing its part, isolating people immediately as they have been infected. The idea is not to isolate the healthy, it's isolate the sick. So we have to adopt that strategy, because lockdown, basically, we are we're isolating in both healthy and the sick. So the strategy should be isolate the sick. That's the only way. Whether you have a large house where you can isolate your own relative or your wife or your whoever, you can isolate in your own home. But the poor people out there cannot isolate because their homes are very, very small. So they will have to go to the quarantine centers. So if we just follow this simple strategy and execute it well, then definitely we will be away from ECQ. We will be able to maintain normal business like South Korea and other countries. And our own people will be able to employ and be employed, and we will be able to pay taxes. The government will go back to normal. They will generate revenues, because social remuneration and whatever we're trying to do is not going to work. And I agree that the stimulus package should have an infrastructure element. And that's what I told Secretary Dominguez. I mean, it's time that you get the workers to work on all our road network, because we're under the sun. I mean, it's hot now. You know, when I talked to 80 of the priests and bishops last Sunday, and I asked them, what is the incidence of the virus in your respective areas? And they all were unanimous in saying it is very minimal. When we talked to the proponents of the Caritas project, which involved about 30 business organizations led by the Zobel brothers, the same thing was relayed to them, that many of the poor are somehow resilient to the virus, maybe because they are so used to so much exposure that they have a better immunity than us who are sheltered in well-protected environment. And that's the same case I make. Why shelter and lock down the healthy when we should, isolate the infected? And moving forward, that should be the case, and that should be the strategy. And we're all aligned with the business organizations and the private sector. And hopefully you there also join us in this quest. I mean, in the end, let's not debate as to whether that rapid test kit works or not. The proof is Ricky Razon is one of those who has succeeded in his business. Why is he going to test his employees and waste so much money if it is not working? And I've seen this help a lot of people. Of course, if you test it one time, you might not see the right result. Test frequently. Now, if you do the PCR test and spend 3,500, the moment you get out there and ride a bus and you sit beside an infected person, you will still get infected. So you cannot test yourself one time and say, I am cured. It's not a vaccine. It's just a test. So frequency of testing is also very important to create visibility. There is no other way, honestly speaking. If you want, you can have a 1 trillion like America stimulus package that we can't afford. It will blow up in our face. Realistically, the only way to solve this problem is to restart the economy. What else? There's no other way. I cannot think of any other way that is real. So our economy is sleeping. So let's restart it. Let's put up this defense. Let's do the testing, isolation, and tracing, and be vigilant at the barangay level. And the moment it starts hitting at the city level, damn it, then somebody is not doing his job. So vigilance cannot be only while we have ECQ. You don't want to be locked down again with the second wave when we go through how many 4 resets. So that's what I'm trying to say. And people are asking me, why am I doing this? I've been doing this for the last 15 years, trying to help MSMEs rise above. We've seen many succeed in life. And the challenge is now that they've gone up, they're now facing the worst time in their life. Everybody, look around you. Everybody is now shivering in fear because what their business model, it's not a question of money anymore. Business models will change. Schools will change. Believe me, schools will not be allowed to open. And I think it's dangerous if they open this year, because as we allow more people in the workforce and you allow the students to come up, that's definitely an explosive thing. So even former Secretary of Health, Janet Garin, said the same thing. Let's keep the kids first on our homes with us. Don't get them to the schools, and allow most of the workforce to work, because they're bringing in the money that will earn money for their families so that they can buy food and they can buy medicines. So that's the game plan. And hopefully a virus cure will be discovered soon. But then again, what if there is none? So we have to plan for the worst, that it may take 2 years, 3 years. If we think this is over in 12 months, we gotta be crazy. So our plans have to be assume that there is no cure. How do you exist with this kind of virus around us? So that should be the game plan. How will business models change? How will schools evolve? You can go online, but people were telling me, oh, it's so hard because the signal is bad here and there. And maybe there's other ways, because this will disrupt many people. It's disrupting newspapers, it's disrupting television. Everybody's now glued to their telephone because you've got Facebook. All our meetings now are on Zoom, Teams. It will change the way how we do work. Work from home will now be part of life, part of how we do the new normal. And that's how I see it. And it's forcing us to move towards digitalization rapidly. So in the end, we will be able to cope. And again, simple strategy is moving forward. We can never be complacent again. We were complacent once, okay, that we thought maybe, and I thought myself that this virus was just one of those. Looking at the Philippine numbers, the infected was 3. The numbers released by DOH in the earlier days, wow, what's with the Filipinos? We're so invincible. Needless to say, we were not just testing enough. And maybe those numbers were far much larger than we already imagined it to be. So,
Joey.
Again, thank you for inviting.
We have our last reactor. May I call on Tony?
Yes, magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge and congratulate our representatives from the bigger house, Congressman Salacera, Congressman Garin, Congressman Kimbo. And I understand the Committee on Banks, Congressman Cuba, is also working on some with respect to this issue of the post-ECQ situation. I think I could say that the banks are grateful and appreciate the effort of our legislature to address the effect of the lockdown. Because this lockdown, we can't help it. It will destroy demand, it will destroy output, and most important, it will destroy jobs. And we all agree that the most important thing is that it's economic growth, because the primary concern as a consequence would be employment and jobs we need to protect, because only if we have jobs, as Congressman Garin earlier said, will the economy really prosper. So the question is, in the paper that Congressman said, I talk about aggregate demand. We need to keep the aggregate demand flowing, right? And for that to happen, financing has to continue. Because without financing, the usual thing, I mean, it is the lifeblood that ensures that businesses are able to operate. And the problem with this pandemic is that the business sector are all affected, whether they are of the critical industries or non-critical, they are all affected. Because with people staying at home, the demand even for those in the critical industries are also affected. I'll tell you that even in the buying system, our business now is probably 30% of what it used to be. And I'm sure there are other critical industries which are operating at below capacity. So everybody's get affected. And the typical reaction of banks when it comes to this situation is to answer the primary question. There is a contradiction between our role and our duty to protect depositors' money, and at the same time, continue the financing of our businesses and the households, so that the economy could get going. We know very well that the ECQ has impaired a lot of cash flows. It's not only in terms of no sales with salaries, but likewise, there's problem in collections, because the company you're collecting from was probably be affected likewise. And that company is also trying to collect from somebody who's likewise been affected. So there is a chain of reaction resulting in eventually impaired balance sheet because there's no business, cash are not being generated. If it's not generated, and eventually there is this issue of the capacity to pay. Mababayaran po ba ang mga utang sa mga pinagkakautangan? So, and it's not only the direct output. I think it's beyond the 3 billion a day or 60 billion a month that we're talking about. Because it is the destruction of the roots kung saan nanggagaling yung output. And it's the businesses that creates the output. So if those businesses are impaired, eventually it will translate to employment because they will not employ. And when there is unemployment, then we get a big problem in the country. So I think the first task is we need to ensure that the banks remain sound. Not because we love banks, but because we love the workers and we need to keep employment happening. We need to keep employment going. Because if the banking system will stop financing the businesses and the households, then there will be no demand for goods and everything else spirals down. There is money. The banks are, there's a lot of money. But again, we need to also reckon with our obligation to our depositors. The banks won't lend the money unless they are sure it will get repaid because we need to make sure that we'll be able to return the money of depositors when and if they start demanding it.
Noy.
So, all right. So it is in the context, I think, that the fiscal and the monetary intervention happens. Because, for example, the monetary side, I think they've done a wonderful job. They've done a lot of, like, they cut the reserve requirement, they've cut interest rates, they've introduced a lot of regulatory leeway to help the banks cope with this. But I look at it, it's like akin to giving water to the horse. It's not enough that we give the water. We need to make sure that the horse drinks the water. And I think that is where the fiscal intervention comes in. The fiscal intervention program, I think it's very good. But the question I have in mind is one of magnitude. The country has 10.2 trillion in total loans. If we say, what's the impairment? If 10% is impaired, that's 1 trillion pesos. And the amount of financing that we have via loan guarantees, via assistance directly to these institutions, I don't know, it's a question of the details of how sufficient or not sufficient those fiscal intervention would be. Because again, it has to work together. I remember the Southeast Asian financial crisis. It was said that the Philippines have the least time to party during those times of foreign loans of being fed to the Southeast Asian countries. And yet, it took us the longest time, one of the longest time to recover. I think one of the reasons for that is because the bank's capacity to lend was not addressed like it was addressed in our Southeast Asian neighbors. Again, it's not because we love the banks. It is because we need to support the business. And what happens there, eventually, it is the poor who will have to suffer because unemployment will have to go up. And we could see it in the chart that the growth during those periods were among the lowest. So again, we're only talking about magnitude. I think the direction of the solution, the direction of the intervention are rightly set. Question is, and I think the creative solutions being offered, the negative interest rates, and all the other things that are on the table right now will help a lot. Then again, I think it's important also that we make sure that the financial system remains sound, willing, and able to finance the economy. I think the willingness is not a problem. The ability is not a problem. But the problem is what's the prospect, especially if this ECQ gets prolonged. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony. Now, we're supposed to conclude our discussion. I ask our congressmen and congresswomen who are here, they can stay a few minutes because we want
Sir,
to go
can I?
Q&A.
Sir, good afternoon.
Yeah,
Can you hear me? All right. I think my colleagues can answer the issue in the banks better than I can. But I would like to address the issue of Joey, like about the test kits. That is why, in fact, that we have a lot. We are proposing a 20 billion
Yearly.
allotment for test kits yearly. Para massive siya. You can use it in airports, or LGUs can have it, so that it will sustain. Because until we have a vaccine, then we still have to build up consumer confidence and business confidence as well. So that's our proposal, that it is in a kind of way a stimulus, because it will encourage people to go out and go. If you go to a hotel, you can oblige them to have tests, for example. So the basic proposal is 20 billion of test kits every year until we have the vaccine. And going to the health comment, actually health is not an economic stimulus, but we have included it in encouraging more companies in converting or repurposing their businesses. If they want, like DTI can prioritize MSMEs that are focused, that want to go to the health sector, or import-export industries that want to be in the health sector, repurpose their factories. So we have included it in here, but we have to remember that this is a DOH a program. DOH has to have its own program to improve the facilities, to have more nurses, more doctors, but a stimulus is a reaction to what is the effect of the COVID on the economy. Our investment in health will not probably improve our economy, but it is essential in a sense that DOH should have, by come 2021, be in the budget, a bigger budget for whatever improvements we need. Sir, I think that my colleagues can talk about the banks and all that. Thank you.
Kong Sharon, are you planning to include that in consolidated
It's
deal?
included na, sir, ang health, sir, it's integrated in Joey's BBB plus or enhanced BBB. Health is there in the MSMEs. We included priority for those who want to go into repurpose it into a health industry business, and we have some conditions in some of the interventions. Actually, it's there already. Actually, sir.
Sir, if I may add.
Yep.
So in my bill, I have a provision for a long-run plan for economic resilience. The number one item there is building the capacity of the health sector. So there's also mention of the need for that. I just like to comment on what Mr. Magkupa said earlier, that we seem to be going towards the right direction. But the problem is determining the magnitude of assistance that we need to provide. So I am an economist by profession. So there's really major attempt in figuring out the right scale of assistance for each type of assistance. I've done a lot of econometric analysis. I've looked at the national survey data. We've been talking to stakeholders to try to validate what the proper scale is. So mahirap, pero hindi naman po imposible. At least the data would give us like initial numbers to work with, and then we just need to validate it with stakeholders such as you.
By the way, Kong Stella, there are people in the audience who are interested in your econometric calculations or analysis. Where can they access the details of your econometric analysis?
I can share that with you. I haven't actually had the time to sit down and write it up, all the technical details, but I can share my do files and my spreadsheets.
And bring in contact with those who are asking for the...
Yes.
Thank you. Now, with regard to testing, I understand there is an RT-PCR type testing that's almost like rapid testing. The feed of GeneXpert, and it's also only 1,200 per test. Have you looked at this, Joey, in your discussions?
Yeah, it was discussed with Congressman Janet Garin, but she has some reservations about it. It's still being explored, but I think with what Red Cross is doing and what the Ayala, Metro Pacific, ADB are doing, and what we're going to do with the RT-PCR, former Secretary of Health Janet Garin is leading that our side. No, just to give an idea, for about 25 billion pesos, we would be able to double the capacity of all, more than double the capacity of all these 5 hospitals. So it's very simple. I mean, it's no rocket science, and it was explained to us, and we all are now going to support that. So the private sector will help enable all of these RT-PCR machines. No? The question there is, what is the price? It's at 3,500. Our goal and our condition with DOH is we will support it, but let's price it at a more affordable level of about 1,800 to 1,900 pesos. No, not at 3,500. Even if they will charge you to fill it, you just from one pocket to the other. So if testing is more accessible and cheaper to our Filipino people, then they will surely test. No?
Yeah, CEFID is which an RT-PCR is only 1,200 per test. Anyway, that's something that you might wish to look into.
Sir, sir?
Kong Sharon, yes.
Yes, because it was mentioned yung banks kanina. I think PSP is doing a fantastic job addressing the problems now. But in the provisions in the bill also, we added some from loans and different kinds of loans as well as the loan guarantee. That we will also discuss with the agencies as well as the sector. Soon we would try to do a consultative meeting with them so that we can refine the proposals. But yes, we are aware of the liquidity problems as well as the risks. So we need to assess that. So we're working with BSP as well as the other agencies. Thank you, sir.
I think the health of the banks depend on the health of the borrowers. And I think the laws or the consolidated law that you're putting together will precisely address the health of the borrowers so that they don't go into bankruptcy. There is a survey question that we posted when you were registering. Anna, can you show the results? I just want to share this quickly to have a feel of how our audience was looking at the situation in terms of the timing of recovery. Anna, are you there?
Yes, sir. I will share my screen.
Yeah, we asked the question, as you see it, sorry. The question was, in your opinion, how soon will the Philippine economy recover after the ECQ is lifted? And we gave 4 choices, 6 months or less, 6 months to 12 months, 12 months to 18 months, and beyond 18 months. And there were 812 respondents. The results are flashed on your screen. It shows that those who think will take us beyond 18 months, total 23% of the respondents. And those who think it will be done in 6 months, only 8.4. I think it's a very reasonable distribution of opinion. Well, that's just for your information. Now, after hearing the presentations, we now would like to poll again the audience and see how they think the recovery will proceed. What letter best represents, from your point of view, the type of recession the Philippines will suffer on the road towards economic recovery? An L shape, a U shape, V shape, and a W shape. That's a very quick poll. You can find the There's a button there on the poll below your screen. Where is it, Anna? Ah, here, polling. Just click on the polling and you're done. And we'll give feedback to you. Okay? Now, shall we go to some of the questions that have been raised?
Lumabas. Fred, just one. Joey here.
Yeah, Joey.
Kitang-kita naman na 76% think it will be below 18 months. So I think that is the Pareto then. So nobody's expecting it to be long term. So kung ano man sinasabi nila sa mga U-shape, B-shape, iba sa sinasabi nila sa kanila pong instinctive na kung kailan yan ma-achieve. Pangalawa, it's really a bridge to a vaccine. All these things are a bridge to a vaccine. If there's a vaccine tomorrow, all these things, even the so-called new normal, it will not be as significantly critical. So ang importante po dito is you make a call. Kahit kay Sir Mungkupa, ang call ko dyan, next year meron tayong vaccine. So parang nightmare lang ito. Alam mo, ako may psoriasis ako. Pero pagkainom ko ng gamot, maniwala ka, lahat nawala. Lahat nawala. So ganun po ang vaccine ang ano niyan. So I cannot be very negative about first the quality of the bank's assets in terms of, let's say, any asset quality disruption, because that can easily be, kaya nga eksakto lang po itong pinopropose na stimulus package, because it doesn't say any protracted engagement, because the longest that we see is really 3 to 5 years for tourism. And basically for ano pa yung isa, Sharon, yung tourism, for aviation.
Import-export.
Yung import-export na, pinapa-disaggregate ko pa kaya kay Perry. Kasi alam mo dyan yung merong mga disruption, pero pag may vaccine ka na Kaya nga, ang sinasabi ko, kung bago ka pumasok na aeroplano, tinitesting ka, tapos sa bawat pasok ng aeroplano, tinitesting ka, I think it will essentially restore. Kasi ang importante dito, consumer confidence. Bukas, kahit buksan pa natin yan, mag-GCQ buong Pilipinas, maniwala kayo, walang pupunta sa mall. Pangalawa, workers' confidence. Di yan papasok sa trabaho. Ayaw niya mamatay. And then lastly, business confidence. Because that is actually subsumed. But in terms of the other things, I really see a window wherein from February up to June, there is like a cumulative negative impact or shock. Basically, it's a shock. Now, which is, unless you don't think there is a vaccine, then that will be protracted. That's why an 18 months view is the proper way to do it, because even your survey respondents said that 76% of them said that we will recover in 76 months. 76% said that we will recover in 18 months.
Yeah, because that's what the scientists have been talking about,
Precisely. So sinasabi ko, I cannot be OA here or either I can be dismissive. All I'm saying, it's there. Then let's have the appropriate medicine. Nasa intubation ngayon, that's the ECQ. Sunod dyan, nasa dextrose ka. Dahil nga itong mga weight subsidy. Ang sunod na dyan, vitamins.
We were talking with DOT the other day, as an example, and they were proposing like major changes in the campaigns and what is the direction of the industry. Change the aircons in all the hotels dahil daw hindi na pwede centralized. As pointed out by Kong Joey, we need to have parallel plans here. It's the vaccine plan and the one that, what do you want as a structural change? Vaccine or no vaccine, diba? So you have to consider when the agencies plan it. You have to consider once the vaccine is back, then everybody will go back and tour the whole Philippines or the rest of the world. But maybe we're making them spend so much for something that's so temporary. Kaya kailangan iplano ng maayos yung but that's up to the agencies and to the businesses as well.
Just a quick question. The Department of Economic Affairs in the executive branch have come up with their 4-pillar socioeconomic strategy. Will your consolidated bill be reconciled or harmonized with the 4-pillar strategy of the executive branch?
Sharon.
Yes, sir.
Sharon?
Yes, sir. Of course, legislative and the executive will always have to work together. And in fact, now we're very inclusive that even the private sector are giving in their inputs. We'll work, eventually we'll work together and find a common ground.
Now, with respect to the NDC type entity, Kong Joey.
Andyan na eh.
Oh, but will that be applied uniformly to companies? Because the failure of companies most likely this time will not be because of mismanagement,
Yeah.
or incompetence, but because of the situation, the crisis situation. So are we going to, will NDC need to take over companies and take care of these companies, or can the work out be done, outside the NDC?
Naku, allergic nga yung mga kausap namin tungkol dyan eh. Kasi it betrays, sabi ko, that they do not see, they're not as negative about themselves. And these are the worst industries affected. So in short, they don't think they need a bailout. They just think they need a liquidity bridge. Nobody's talking about insolvency at all. And we've run through almost everyone, under the sun. And I can tell you that we are proposing the NDC just in case somebody needs it. So essentially, one, kung gusto mo ng just loans and you just give us some collateral so we can be your partner so that the banks will not go after you, things like that. So that will essentially, but in terms of taking them over, I don't think that is the plan. I think that's way past, it's the 1970s model of the NDC. Right now, we're just using it as pub they call. Yes.
I'm glad to hear that that's not the intention. Now, I've looked at the law and some other comments I received from our audience. Where do the private commercial banks feature in the fiscal stimulus?
Unang-una, sa mga SMEs na nahihirapan, mga 433 billion, assuming na natin na times 2, times 3, yung asset backing nun. So we need about 1.6 to 3 trillion. So siya pa rin ang banker ng mga SMEs, pero ang mangyayari po dyan, papasok po ang gobyerno, one, is yung negosyo center or DTI or the SBC or the PGC will come in to provide guarantees. Okay, huwag niyong pag-initan yung mga bata namin, mga anak namin. Tingin namin nasaktan lang yan dahil merong what you call that external shock. Pangalawa, pwede namin pakiusapan ng mga bangko na sana gawin nyo ng new loans so wala na mga penalties, arrearages. So essentially, big brother lang ang gobyerno for the SMEs because they need the know-how as well as, of course, the backing of the government in order to deal with the big, with the commercial bank. The banks will still be the banker to the SMEs and to all the private enterprises. Pero alam mo, hindi natin napapansin dyan kasi nakafocus tayo dito sa mga tinatawag natin panggamot ng sugat o panggamot po ng pilay. Pero yung pamparubos, yan po talaga ang bill. Yung infra. Pag tinignan mo po doon sa bill na ginagawa namin, very distinct po doon. Nabigyan po ang gobyerno, unang-una, kung ayaw nyo ng special power, ang presidente para patakbuhin niya ng mas matulin, pwede rin namin gawin po ng PPP na lahat po mabigyan po ng mga powers ng BCDA, yung mga humawak po ng bill para mas mabilis, para po yung private sector naman hindi mauutang sa gobyerno yan, uutang yan sa mga bangko. So yun po ang bali magiging channel. So nakikita ko naman once you have the BBB, because that catches everything, all the boat will rise with the bill, simply because of its multiplier, as well as the same time because of the productivity enhancement and of course the business expansion. So ang focus kasi sa stimulus is actually the infra. Ito po yung mga panagpi-tagpi lang po namin yan ng mga sugat-sugat at yung mga pilay po, yung mga yung mga ino-offer namin sa transitional. Pero yung pangmatagalan po, Kung meron man po mga asset quality disruption, yun ang balak namin. Pasok sila, magkaroon tayo ng asset resolution mechanism either to the NDC, to the CMRS, and of course, offer para po magkaroon ng animal spirit, may balik sa entrepreneurship, yung negative interest loan kasi automatic. May kita ka. Kasi kung if you know how to trade those loans, then basically you already have you immediately have a trading margin. So, ayun lang gusto namin pong mapanumbalik yung tiwala, yung kumpiyansa. Pero ang importante po, lahat nagsisimula po sa minimum health standard. Hindi na po pwede tayo bumalik sa dati. And I will not call it the new normal. I will just call it the minimum health standard. And then you have two pathways. One pathway where the vaccine 18 months, another pathway where it is 36 months. That I think is the business proposition.
Okay.
Sir, yung sa banks kasi we have some provisions like the special purpose vehicle, the relaxation of the reserve requirements, but those are more, you cannot, there's independence with the BSP. Yeah. But at the same time, we are also providing loans through government institutions, but they can use the commercial banks or co-ops or rural banks as conduits for the loans. Yes. The PGC, in fact, we are hoping to put as much as we could there so that they can guarantee the loans they take out in any bank. Depends on how much they will guarantee and according to the rules and guidelines of PGC. Pero meron po, sir, and also hopefully BSP goes on the way they are doing now, that they are very supportive of jump-starting the economy po, sir.
Well, there is a question on where will all the money come from, Of course, borrowings. And how will these borrowings impact the credit rating of the country? Can you give a view on that for the benefit of the person who asked the question?
Yung natin survival, yan po ay mga realignments lang. Kung meron man lang po doon that will impair future capacity, it's because we're using the earnings of the GOCC, which are actually earmarked for 2021. But that's assumed that this year na inagamit na po namin. So I think from the survival measure, the one you see, the SAP, the small business wage subsidy, everything like that, up to 350 billion. 189 billion that are essentially realignments, and 175 billion of that are organic revenues of our GOCC. So, eksakto lang po. Pag lumampas ka na May 15, sinasabi ko na, nagagamit na tayo ng pera na sana ginamit natin para sa recovery. Kaya napaka-importante po na matapos natin ang lahat na kailangan by way of minimum health requirements, minimum health conditions. Maraming tao. So, para dito sa 1.5 trillion namin, for next year, pag lumampas ka na May 15, sinasabi ko na,
request
tayo ng pera na sana ginamit natin para sa
the others.
na matapos natin.
Who's speaking?
Ako.
Okay, nawala na. Joey, it's back to you.
So yung ginagamit ngayon nila Sec Dominguez, yan po ay wala akong kaduda-duda na kaya po yan. Kung meron man pong dagdag yan, yung 325 dahil po sa pag-collapse ng revenue due to the 4 months na nagkaroon po tayo ng tinatawag nating external shock o yung lockdown shock. So, well, self-imposed shock pala yun. So, pero po, yung mga susunod po, katulad for next year, definitely, ngayon po, nasa 8.4% of deficit tayo of GDP. That looks very favorable. But that's because of the revenue fall. Next year, we want to see a 7%. So, tinatanong mo sa manggagaling, it will be from 7, kung funding po, it will be 7% deficit to GDP, and then it will fall to about 4.5% in 2022. So, yung 7% po, sino mag-finance? Sabi ko na kanina na yung mga yung because of our credit ratings na maintain at Pangalawa, downward sloping naman po yung deficit trend natin to GDP. Pangatlo, nasa 41% tayo, baka umakyat po ng 45 by year end. So kayang-kaya pa po. We're one of the lowest. Our forex to GDP is the lowest in 23. We have space all across. So kaya po. Ang importante po, at the end of the day, it is the infrastructure. Once po mapatagpi-tagpi, once na ma-intubate mo na, ma-dextrose mo na, yung mga sugat ay maano mo na, yung mga pilay ay maano mo na, kailangan na po talaga ng vitamins, and that is most important to a stimulus. It's really to grow the economy, and the best grower of economy is infrastructure. And that is built with together with a reinvigorated private-public partnership, PPP, because I think at this point, yung pinakamabilis na mga PPP, mabilis na build, ay ginawa ng BCDA dahil po sa PPP. Kaya we should build on that model.
Now,
So is it financeable, sir? Yes, it's part of the presentation I had.
yes, thank you. Now, in connection with infrastructure, this crisis has shown us the critical importance of digitalization. Unfortunately, one major infrastructure that's missing in our country is the internet backbone to connect the whole country. Can the legislature do something about this? Make sure that we finally are able to have our web backbone.
Sagot ko dyan, tagal ko nakamot ulo. Hindi ko alam kung anong gagawin na dyan. Nag-create na tayo ng department to do it, and still I think there's something very wrong. I don't know, but that's why, I don't know, Sharon, you might answer that. You might want to.
In fact, in the build ni Joey, there is the schools for the future, di ba? He wants that. Actually, the enhanced build includes the UHC, well, the health sector, the construction of, for schools of the future, and then also the creative industries. It's very well thought. Creative industries, because we want to promote, since DOT wants to promote local destinations, we improve our culture. Parang mga ganun. But, and then Stella also included some provisions in technology. And also Congressman Vic Yap wanted to give incentives for any technological ventures in relation to COVID-related na mga measures natin. So there are some in the provisions. Yes, Stella.
If I may add, President Pascual, so I added a provision allowing implementing agencies to partner with private sector, particularly, for example, providers of digital solutions, so that the huge amounts of money that we will appropriate for purposes of economic stimulus can be effectively and swiftly provided to the businesses. So we've already learned also from the Bayanihan Act na nagkaroon tayo ng counting implementation challenges dahil napakalaki ng pera at napakaraming beneficiaries po. So ayaw po natin maulit yan. And so we put in a provision there so that government can work with, for example, payment processors, for example, so that disbursement can be done digitally. And that way also, we can easily create a database. Kasi dito po sa iniisip po namin, a distressed business, for example, can go to multiple windows of assistance. So ang kailangan po dyan is magkaroon ng database po of assisted businesses. So this way, there's monitoring of the kind of assistance that each business would have. And in addition po, yung mga loans na binibigay po natin, tulad na nabanggit ni Kong Joey, may labor conditionality. So kung isang work, meaning to say, if you take out a loan from government because of COVID, kailangan i-retain niya ang at least 90% of workers. So kung ikaw po ay isang empleyado at ikaw po ay natanggal sa iyong trabaho, pwede mong alamin, teka muna, tumanggap ba ang aking employer ng assistance mula sa gobyerno? In which case, potentially nagbabiolate po yung employer, di ba? So anyway po, itong digital solution na yan is for purposes nga po of creating finally this database that we need po to run especially our social protection programs.
I don't know, is that true? Yun na ba?
That's in the guidelines eh.
Kailan na bang sabi?
Okay.
Wala, ang concessionaire.
Thank
Wala,
you.
oo, wala. So, bring your own baon or
Ang hirap ng Zoom.
Yata tayo rito eh. Okay. Thank you for bringing up the effort to improve the infrastructure. But just a reminder or an added thought on this. When we talk of infrastructure, there is always the complementary requirement for suprastructure. You know, the people who will make sure that the infrastructure is effectively and efficiently utilized. We need to train our manpower, our human resources to be able to make full use of the modern infrastructure that we are setting up. Please always keep in mind.
Sino po? Conjoy?
Yes. Fred, what is UP4? Number 2.
Kulang pa rin. We need
No, number 2, ito kasing stimulus, it starts after the ECG. So baka akala nila na para minamaliit namin. Pero this is really transitional and then goes to structural. Pangatlo, if you look at the net fiscal carrying cost ng mga structural, itong 900 billion under my bill, it's really just 15%. Half of the entire thing really is, so halos lahat po ng mga nakapasok po dyan sa stimulus, kalahati po niyan sa unang taon is basically the transitional, and the following year is virtually all about infrastructure stimulus.
Okay.
Talagang alam namin kung anong instrument. Kaya sabi ko kay Secretary Dominguez, bibigay namin sa iyo sa operating room yung scalpel, yung tweezer, yung lahat. Nasa iyo na lang kung ano ang sa tingin mo ang tamang gamiting instrumento para doon sa pasyente. So we will, but at the end of the day, the best instrument is infrastructure.
If I may add po, President Pascual, so agree naman po ako kung Joey na dahil sa multiplier effects ng infrastructure, it's really an effective long-term stimulus intervention. But I also agree with you po that ayaw natin magtayo ng bridge to nowhere. Di ba tama po? So kailangan natin ng plano po ng paggamit ng infrastructure ng tama. So ang tingin ko po yung pag-consolidate po ng bills namin ni Kong Joey pagdating sa long run, swak na swak po yung pag-consolidate kasi po meron po ako doon long run plan for economic resilience which includes po the structural reforms that we need. So sa tingin ko po kasama po dyan yung industry roadmaps, etc. So if that long-term plan for including the structural reforms will be put in place, eksakto po yun doon sa lahat po ng fruits po ng enhanced BBB in the next 5 years.
I think it's very good that we are availing of the opportunity to address the long term while we are taking care of the emergency situation. You know, kung siguro nakafocus lang sa long term, baka mahirap ipasa. No? Maganda yung napagsama na dyan at pwedeng pumasa. Now,
may ano nga yan, sir, like, diba, there's wage subsidy, that's 2 months. That will give the companies a chance, 2 months, 75% of their wage, payroll cost, 35 to 75%. We'll give it for 2 months, bibigyan sila. It will address the immediate liquidity problem, diba? On the condition that they retain the employees. And then, a little further down, you have the credit lines na provided. So, it's a well-thought bill ng mga economists natin. And then, they have the structural changes. So, maganda yung pagkakalagay because it's liquidity, and then later, what are the fundamental changes that you want in the long run.
That's good. We retain the employment for our people and also help banks maintain their health. As we have told earlier, very critical in the workings of the economy. So, as I said, you know, healthy banks require healthy borrowers or liquid borrowers who can pay. Anyway, in terms of tracking people, isn't it timely also to enforce the implementation of the national ID system now? Can it be done in parallel? Because, you know, that's another very critical, well, we can call it an infrastructure or arrangement that we need, and yet it's taking so long to implement. And there is strong resistance. But now, maybe we make that as a condition for availing of all the benefits that are available from the law that you are crafting. Then we can achieve, you know, again, something that would be difficult to achieve under normal.
Totally agree.
Okay, so I hope we can, I don't know how we can incorporate it.
Now, maybe they will address it in the bayanihan, but if not, then we will seriously consider it in the bill. We'll give. I think it's a budget problem probably, or some implementation problem. But if there's budget, then hopefully they can fast track.
There's a question here. What happens to Sitira?
Sitira, Joey.
It's in the Senate.
Go.
It's in the Senate, but our plan is if the Senate is able to, and one will continue it, but give both for the income tax reduction and for the incentive rationalization, will give the full powers to the president. We won't give that problem to the next president. So in other words, when to do it, if to do it, the 1%, they can do it 5%. So, but I think at the end of the day, it's really about our fiscal principles. So we will just give the empowerment or we'll put it in place kasi nandun po yung talagang bias for the countryside yung mga sinasabi namin talagang outside Metro Manila you get 12 years to 19 years. Inside Metro Manila, you only get 3 plus 2, you only get 5. So very clear na you have to invest outside Metro Manila. That is the message.
Hello, Fred.
Francis?
Yeah.
Yes.
I have a question here, no?
Okay.
Is Congress willing to put in a provision on a moratorium from tax investigations for a certain period so that people can really focus on going back to work? And during that period, the BIR should conduct a tax information education campaign. So that's a question that
parang i-forgive yung kasalanan mo dahil
hindi forgive lang, hindi wag muna wag muna mag-moratorium lang for let's say 3 years. Thereafter, things can proceed as usual, but ang sinasabi nitong proponent na ito is so that people can really focus on doing what's expected of them to help the economy recover. And at the same time, give that period to the BIR to conduct a tax information campaign like education, so on and so forth. I don't know. That's just a proposal that was texted to me.
Mr. Chairman of the Committee on Ways and Means?
It won't pass.
We'll take it up with the agency, sir.
Okay.
Thank you for the suggestion.
Here on the universal, the funding of the universal health law will be affected because universal health law has its own source of funding. Do you have any view on this?
The excise taxes?
Yeah, excise tax on sin taxes.
Answer that.
Stella is the prime, health economy.
I know.
Well, I guess the question is, handa na po ba ang DOH na i-roll out ang universal healthcare? Hindi, totoo po. Meron na pong IRR, pero sa totoo lang po, wala pa pong proof of life. So, at tuwing pupunta po sila sa Kongreso, lagi po nilang ine-emphasize po sa amin na ang pag-roll out niyan would be in phases. So, wala pa po talagang pag-roll out, pag-umpisa. Kasi remember, ang kailangan pong gawin sa universal healthcare, dalawa po. One is universal coverage po ng PhilHealth, and the other one is that every Filipino would have his own or her own healthcare provider, primary healthcare provider. So, wala pa po akong nakikitang concrete evidence na meron na pong pag-roll out. So before the COVID nga happened, I actually checked with them kung talagang nag-umpisa na ng pag-roll out. Ay hindi pa po. At syempre po, overtaken by events po. Syempre ngayon po, busy naman po sila sa COVID.
Well, this is just a side question related to digital transformation. Will the legislature be able to force the government to do a digital transformation in all its operations?
Force, sir, force. No, sir. It's there are so many legislations already that provides for digitalization. And in fact, for example, I've written the Customs Modernization and Tariff Act, for example, which provides for automation. But it takes a while for implementation. There are hurdles along the way, and the laws are there already. So I think with the COVID crisis that we have, siguro naman this will encourage. It took a COVID for us to realize that we have to implement.
We better make full use of the COVID situation to achieve the thing.
The laws, yes, sir. The laws are there already, so we know now that we really have to do it. So it's, I think the executive already knows that as well.
Okay. There other comments from our panelists who are still around? Any further reaction? Anna, do you have the results of the poll? I mean, just for curiosity, let's just show it. Although Kong Joey has already explained very clearly, what the key determinant of our recovery is. Anna, you have it?
Oh, there.
Yan.
You see it.
Nangyari.
So mainly, we're not that pessimistic that we will be, an L shape forever going horizontally.
So at least 92% mistake.
Oh, which is good. You're complaining about businessmen not admitting to themselves, that they need to face a problem. Aren't you happy that that's the case,
Yeah, kasi parang nalula ka lang dito ng 3 buwan eh.
Oh.
Kung walang vaccine yan, hindi nalula. Problema talaga malaki yan. Pero ang problema, ang naman natin is that there is a sign that says that essentially we might have it in 9 months earliest and possibly within 18 months, most likely, very likely we will have it in 18 months. So all these things that we are feeling right now of insecurity will just fall in the wayside. It's like you had a magic that suddenly said, presentation ko, Rumpelstiltskin is my name. Because, biology is waving across the globe. So if you mistake it, and kailangan lang po talaga, alam mo yung pangalan ni Rumpelstiltskin eh. But no, you don't have to give up anything just to gain those not magic, but rather suddenly you change the view. There will be a sea change of view once there is a cure and there's a vaccine. Tell you, it's so easy to get into these things. I've been in the markets for so long, and I tell you, I can easily exaggerate all the pessimism. You can easily get dated by all the pessimism and then forget. You look forward. What's in there? The possibility of a vaccine. To my mind, that's why the markets, even the US, know their vaccine. Well, that's a statement of faith.
In UK, they're already testing a vaccine, which is good. So,
sir, the House of Representatives is really working hard for a stimulus package, and hopefully we can all meet with the Senate on all the agencies and also the executive so that we can come up. And I think all of these offices are working hard. So we understand that there's, yes, how temporary it is, how short or long it is, pero medyo malaking band-aid to kailangan natin dito for them to survive up to the time that the vaccine is there. So we are working hard. We are working hard so that businesses survive, and at the same time that they protect the Filipino employees. Yun po, we understand the problem. We are aware of what they need, and hopefully we can come into agreement on what the package will be. But rest assured po, we are on it.
Anyway, President Fred.
Yeah.
I think there is a consensus on the where. What we're trying to build up a consensus is to how. Basically, as to where, I think there's pretty much a clear view of where we want to go. This situation wherein apparently there's no cure and there's no vaccine. So essentially, between now and towards a vaccine, you can choose two kinds of bridges. One that assumes you're gonna belong, and the other one means, well, your respondent says 92%. It will not be an L shape. 76% said it will be in months. So I think you have a very basic audience.
It is good for the country. Don't you think? You don't want pessimism.
The how will be given by the UP because the where was provided by Ateneo.
Akala ko ba collaborative?
Ateneo UP team yan. Di ba, Sharon?
Ateneo Law School po ako, sir. UP College, UP Safe Accounting.
Yan yung
Magaling na ngayon.
Di Katipunan.
Hybrid.
Yung Katipunan na neighborhood. Okay, so I think we have a very informative afternoon talking about this very important subject. And the response when we announced this was overwhelming. We had 800 registrants. Unfortunately, we didn't. I think we only allowed for at most 500. And there were difficulties in signing in. So what was the peak? We got almost 500 in terms of number of participants, which is the limit of our arrangement with Zoom. But thank you very much, Kong Joey, Kong Sharon, Kong Stella. You have shared very important and I will not say consoling, but thoughts that will make us face the future with more confidence. So I hope these things work.
Ang hirap talaga ng UP.
Siguraduhin na natin. Okay, so we're all working for one country, one people, of course, oneself. So we need to do the best we can for all our stakeholders. Thank you and good day.
Thank you.
Salamat po.
We're very thankful for our speakers and our panelists. Thank you.
Maraming salamat po. Good afternoon.
Sige po.